Welcome to the Peep Podcast. I'm your host, Nicolle, and on this episode, we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, haunted locations. Have you ever walked into a place and had the hair on the back of your neck stand up? Maybe your experience wasn't quite that dramatic. It might have been more subtle, like when you enter a room and the energy feels different than the previous room you were in. Maybe you felt like somebody was watching you, or you just felt as if you weren't totally alone. Perhaps for an instant you smelled a strong scent, like roses, cologne, pipe smoke, or mothballs, and that as suddenly as it came on, it disappeared with no obvious explanation. These are all things that are often attributed to haunted locations. I've been a paranormal investigator since 2009, and I've spent many nights in public places and private homes looking for validation or mundane explanations for the experiences of others. When investigating, my group looks at everything from the history of the location to the geography, to whether it seems to have high points of EMF, electromagnetic frequency, that may cause specific symptoms in sensitive people, or temperature fluctuations caused by naturally occurring drafts, or even pests in the walls or crawl space. We attempt to rule out the mundane before jumping to the conclusion of calling a place haunted. Sometimes we spend an entire night leaving the place as the sun is rising with no evidence to show for it. Sometimes we have personal experiences within the first 5 minutes of arriving and immediately understand why we were invited there. If we're lucky, upon reviewing our data, we find electronic voice phenomena on our digital recorders or, on rare occasions, anomalous video. Regardless of whether we have anything of interest to show the location owner when we're done, we're grateful that they trust us enough to have us investigate, and we want to offer our best educated guess as to what might be going on at the property. In order to do that in a scientific, professional, logical way, there are certain aspects of each place we try to look at before we even press the record buttons on our equipment. In today's episode, you'll meet Brandon Massullo, and we'll discuss some of those aspects and how they could play into the feelings sensitive people may experience when they visit a supposedly haunted location. Brandon Massullo is a clinical therapist, author, and parapsychologist residing in Northeast Ohio. He has graduate degrees in clinical counseling from the University of Toledo and psychological research methods from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, UK. His research at the University of Edinburgh centered on EMFs and ghostly encounters, and he studied within the Koestler Parapsychology Unit at the University of Edinburgh. Brandon has been fascinated by paranormal phenomena for 20 years and has been a participant and featured speaker in numerous paranormal forums and events, including Coast to Coast AM and the Parapsychological Association's 60th anniversary celebration. His research has been cited in parapsychological journals, newspaper articles, and mainstream books. Please visit Brandon's blog, Haunted Theories, for more research into ghosts, apparitions, and all things paranormal. Let's dive in with Brandon. Hi, Brandon. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, it's great to be here.
I'm going to start with an obvious question before we dive into your research. What made you interested in parapsychology?
I wish I had a cool answer for that. I actually, when I was in high school, I just started reading a bunch of books on parapsychology. Just found one at the library, picked it up, started reading it, and then I got interested in it. I never had an experience when I was growing up. I didn't live in a haunted house. I didn't really have parents who talked extensively about ghosts or uncles or anything like that. I just picked up the book, was really interested in it, and kind of went from there. I I liked Ghostbusters as a kid, so I always was curious what parapsychologists were. And like I said, just picked up the book, started reading. Next thing you know, I'm in college for psychology, and then I was at my undergrad was at the University of Toledo, and I was always interested in parapsychology. It's probably one of the reasons I went into psychology. But the one of the university professors there told me it wasn't gonna. Yeah, I won't be able to make any money on it. So he
Hmm.
encouraged me to go into like clinical psychology. So I actually took his advice and I did that for a number of years, and I still do that. It's sort of my paying job. Um, but I got so interested in parapsychology, I went over and studied it in Scotland at the University of Edinburgh. So it really just started with, I guess, the Ghostbusters and curiosity about what parapsychology is. Then picked up a book, read more books at the library, and then off I went.
Do you happen to remember the name of that first book?
Yes, it's Oh, you're gonna put me on the spot. I think it's a concise history of parapsychology. I think John Beloff wrote it,
Okay.
if I remember
I
correctly.
don't
I'm probably messing up the title a little bit, but I'm pretty sure that's close.
I don't know that one, but I ask because my entryway to parapsychology was also a book at the library. So
Okay,
just
what was your
wondering
book?
if we have that in common. Um, I think it was called Elvis Speaks from Beyond or something like that, and it was by Hans Holzer. So
Oh, okay.
it had a cheesy name, but it was Hans Holzer. And at one point, I think I owned almost every book he ever wrote. And then in college, I got broke and started selling off books. So I only have a few
Oh,
left.
gosh. I actually only have one of his books, and it's that one that's like 1,500 pages, um, with all the ghost stories in it. Um,
Yeah,
and
that
obviously
is
you
one
can't
of the
read
ones I
that.
have.
Yeah, it's
No,
hard to read that from
that's,
start to finish.
yeah, I just kind of have to pick it up and read a few pages and put it back down.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Occasionally I'll pick it up and just um, find a good story and read through it.
yeah. So when you went to Edinburgh, what was your experience there? It seems like that would be the place to go if you are interested in parapsychology.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. When I went over there, it's like the Koestler unit is probably, I guess, world renowned for parapsychology. And the University of Edinburgh is a top 25 university in the world. I mean, this is where they cloned the sheep. Darwin went to University of Edinburgh. It's been around since, well, they're going to hate me for this, 1500 something. So it's a well-known academic institution. So not only did you have the prestige of a top 25 university, but also you can study parapsychology when you're there. And that's sort of what drew me to it. The hard part was sort of getting in. They don't really take too many students. Um, and I was the only American in the psychology department. So I was really shocked when they actually accepted, because I wasn't like a stellar student. I did okay, but I wasn't, breaking records in the States. So I was really excited to go over there. And the experience over there was pretty good. What's great about Scotland is everyone is very open to the paranormal over there. Pretty much every store you go into, they'll tell you a ghost story about it. So the people are very open minded. And I think that includes academics as well as, just everyone you come across in the streets. So it's a really good experience. When I walked in, you never know what to expect. Um, like I had a
Hmm.
picture of what I thought the Koestler unit was, like all these fancy machines and beeping lights and, all this stuff. And it's really, it's just a normal academic floor. It's the third floor on the psychology building, and it's not really something special, but at the same time, the people there are really great, and you get to learn quite a bit about parapsychology from the people on the front lines. And that was really the main inspiration that I went over there for. So my research supervisor was Dr. Caroline Watt. So I worked pretty close with her on my dissertation, and Dr. Peter Lamont was also there. He wrote a lot on or psychics. I think Hume was
Hmm.
who he wrote quite a few books on. And he was easy to talk to, and overall it was a great experience. But when you go study parapsychology, at least the program I was at, which is for an MSc, then then you really study statistics. So most of my coursework was on statistics, utilizing statistical methods, understanding statistical methods, individual differences, um, current research, these types of things. It wasn't like you sit in a room and learn about all about ghosts and psi and PK. You really only had one or two, I think maybe two classes on parapsychology. The rest was just statistics.
Was that kind of a shock to you?
It was. It actually was. I was expecting a little bit more on parapsychology, but my actual degree is psychological research methods with a specialization in parapsychology. So my degree is not technically parapsychology. So there was other students in there who had a specialization in neuro, cognitive psychology, I think, individual differences. I can't remember all the disciplines that were there, but we all had specializations. But we all were pretty much in the same classes learning about psychological research methods.
I think that's really cool. And just the fact that there's even a well-known and well-respected university anywhere that is offering any sorts of degrees in parapsychology is great. Because back when I was reading Hans Holzer, had I realized that, I probably would have gone down a different path.
Yeah,
And
yeah, the states definitely don't have that many.
yeah. And this was a long time ago, so it was hard to even get anybody who took themselves seriously as an academic to consider talking about this stuff. So
Yeah,
things are a lot easier now. But
yeah, yeah.
as you've done a lot of research, and so I have your book, The Ghost Studies, and I read three papers that you shared with me.
Yep.
So we've got Understanding Consumer Enchantment via Paranormal Tourism Part 1, a conceptual review, and Environmental Gestalt Influences Pertinent to the Studies of Haunted Houses, as well as Things That Go Bump in the Literature and Environmental Appraisal of Haunted Houses. And I know you know what you took part in writing, but for the listeners, those are the three that I've read, and as well as the book, which I will admit that I bought the book after I heard you on Astonishing Legends. So
Oh, I love Astonishing
I,
Legends.
yeah, I absolutely adore that podcast. And I was
Hmm.
listening to the episode that they just put out yesterday. And some of the things that they were discussing during the episode was kind of a throwback to the episode that you were in. So I thought, well,
Oh,
that's pretty neat.
yeah.
So
The great, and I know it's kind of going off a little bit of a tangent here, but the great news about Forrest and Scott are they're as nice as they sound on the podcast. That's how nice they are in person and over the phone when the microphones aren't on. They're just as nice, and they have so many great questions. It's really a great podcast. They took that deep dive into the Sally House, which was like 4 hours long, or maybe even more. I
yeah,
don't know. It's like 3 episodes. It might have been like 8 hours long. I don't remember. But the dive they took into that haunted location was something that you don't even see really in academic papers. Like they were going asking ham radio people if the recordings they got were could be something else. I mean, you don't even see that anywhere. Even like I said, in academic papers or just case studies, people just don't go that far. But they did.
I know. I love it. They just have this insatiable curiosity, and they're willing to entertain all possible hypotheses and theories, and it's
Yeah.
just it's really fun to listen to. Actually, as part of the inspiration for my starting this podcast was listening to them slightly obsessively. Um, so anyway, back to the research. I'm really good for getting off on tangents. So, um, before I actually talk about the specifics of those papers, I do want to talk about what you think makes somebody more sensitive than others. Like, what is there some sort of wiring that makes some people more sensitive to experiences, or what has your research told you so far?
Um, I think that there's really when we look at ghostly encounters, if we're looking specifically at that, we all know, for those of us who sort of surround ourselves in the paranormal field, there's people who have numerous amounts of reported experiences, and there's others who have zero or maybe one in their whole life, correct? So you kind of look at that and you go, why is one person having so many and the other not? Sometimes you can go skeptical or reductionist and think, oh, they're just lying or they're fantasy prone or something like that. But there's been more recent research on the role of something called environmental sensitivity when it comes to these experiences. And a guy by the name of Michael Jower was the first to sort of bring it into the paranormal world in his book, The Spiritual Anatomy of Emotion. But what it is this notion that we all experience the world differently, right? We're all unique in our senses and how we perceive things. Um, when I walk into Sherwin-Williams, I see 4 paint colors. My wife sees 400. I can't see the difference between white and eggshell white. She can. So her view of the world is different. And when we talk about sensitivity, it's not so much this psychic sensitivity, but it's more or less this ability to some people just have the ability to perceive things that other people don't. The environment impacts them more than others. And that's a thing called environmental sensitivity. So these people, as opposed to the general population, are just more sensitive to the things that are around them. And that could be smells, it could be lighting, it could be electromagnetic fields, it could be chemicals. So if I walk into a room and I sit down on a couch, or if I walk into a room and there's fluorescent lighting and I sit down on a chair that's just been rubbed with bleach and I'm sitting next to a guy with a lot of Old Spice on, it doesn't really impact me too much. Someone else might walk in that same place, get headaches from the light, get a rash from the cleaning supplies on the seat, and then start getting nauseous over the Old Spice. So their perception of the world is a little bit different. And when it comes to environmental sensitivity, what they found is those people who are classified as environmentally sensitive, just more impact from the environment, what they found was that they had way, 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 way more paranormal experiences than the general population. So something was going on. Do I have the answer about what it is as far as the wiring and those types of things? That's a long answer to that question. If anyone really wants to know, The Spiritual Anatomy of Emotion by Michael Jower takes a deep dive into that. I won't bore you and your listeners with all that, but I think that if you just look at the macro piece of this, there's people who are sensitive to the environment. They're having more paranormal experiences. So the question is, are they just picking up on something that the general population doesn't generally pick up on? So if there is, let's say, theoretically, ghosts are in the environment, right? Or telepathy is in the environment, or something is in the environment. Obviously, these people who are more apt to pick that up or more sensitive to it will. And then they interpret that as either ghostly encounters, misinterpret it as ghostly encounters, or interpret it as ghostly encounters, like real phenomena. That's a long answer. I know you probably weren't expecting all that, but that's kind of how I view that.
No, actually, that's a great answer. All honesty, I am one of those sensitive people. So
Oh,
my
okay.
question was a little bit on the selfish side because I've always wondered why me. So I appreciate the long answer.
Yeah, and I've when this book came out, I got thankfully I got invited to a lot of conferences. I got on a lot of podcasts. So I've talked to a lot of different people, and sometimes that's the thing that resonates most with them, this environmental sensitivity. So people who
Mm-hmm.
are environmentally sensitive, they tend to have like migraines, allergies, sensitivity to light, smell, sound. Even in the medical field, there's something called multiple chemical sensitivity. You could actually be on disability for that in Canada. It just basically means that, because you're so overtly sensitive that you can't really function in a normal world. So I work at a hospital. If I was
Mm-hmm.
really sensitive, there's no way I can go to the hospital. From the smells to the lighting to the amount of EMFs in the air, it would probably overwhelm me.
Yeah. That's interesting that they would actually consider that a disability. And personally, the last place I ever want to be is a hospital. So
Yeah,
I
well,
do feel quite overwhelmed there.
yeah. Imagine trying to work in a factory if you have like multiple chemical sensitivities. So the smells cause you headaches, and fluorescent lighting and loud noise. It's
Mhm.
There's a lot that goes into it. As far as I think medicine, like if there is questionnaires that physicians have to determine if you're environmentally sensitive or not. Um, they might use different words, not environmental sensitivity. They might call it multiple chemical sensitivity or environmental illness. There's sort of different definitions of it, which makes it confusing. But
Mhm.
a physician can ask certain questions, diagnose it, and kind of go from there. The States is a little far behind in that. Like Canada, I think Switzerland, they see it as you can be on disability for it. There's a documentary on Netflix that was on about a year ago about just a group of people who are really sensitive to things. I can't remember the name of it, but there's people who are really sensitive to electromagnetic fields, so they couldn't have phones on them. They were living out in sort of in the middle of nowhere because electricity and all that stuff was causing them all kinds of problems. So that's an extreme part of it. Most people lie more on the middle ground of it impacts their day to day, but it doesn't shut them down. And
Yeah,
then the general population, like me, doesn't really bother me too much.
that's really interesting.
Mhm.
S- Um, okay, so just talking about some of the research that you've done, your recent articles have focused on enchanted spaces or enchanted places. Can you kind of explain what enchantment means in the context of psychology for the listeners?
Sure, sure. So I was co-authored some papers on enchantment, and enchantment, it's basically a mixture of positive and negative emotions. So when we think one is enchanted, it's kind of like, let's say you have a ghostly encounter, right?
Mm.
It's not all positive feelings, right? Because you're a little bit of fear involved in that, correct?
Yeah,
There's a mixture of some positive feelings, and then there's a mixture of some negative feelings like fear, uneasiness, confusion, but also there's that excitement part of things. So it's kind of a mixture of awe and then a little bit of the negative part of that, the fear. And enchantment also has to do with sort of feeling at one sometimes with the environment or feeling at one with the world and these types of feelings. And we've noticed in the article, there's a lot of discussion about, we sort of relate it to paranormal tourism, which has been really, really big recently.
hmm
Actually, not recently, it's getting bigger and bigger every year, I feel like. Um, and there's a lot of people out there that think that there's sort of a sweet spot when you think about paranormal experiences and what keeps people coming back, right?
right.
Um, uh, as far as like haunted houses and paranormal tourism, there's a sweet spot. So it's a mixture of a little bit of excitement, a little bit of awe, and a little bit of fear and confusion. But you don't want to go too far, right? You don't want to go to the point where haunted houses freak you out and you just terrified you never step foot anywhere near it, or haunted attractions. Usually they're not to the point where people are getting heart attacks or anything like that. So the idea is to find that sweet spot. And I think when it comes to paranormal tourism and haunted locations in general, I think enchantment is a huge part of it. There's not much research on enchantment as a psychological construct. This is sort of new. Um,
Mhm.
so it's not like groundbreaking new, but it's new in the fact that I think we dissect enchantment a little bit more than other papers really have in the past. And, where it goes, I don't know. I think it has this ability to, you know, as ghost hunters or paranormal investigators are out there, I think it's always nice to take a sort of account of where you are psychologically, emotions, while you're doing investigations, previous to it, after it, during it, because we found that there's a lot of psychological things that are, um, or emotional, I shouldn't say psychological, emotional things that are going on inside us when we get into a location, right? So if me and you go to investigate a place, and we go to my old high school, when I walk into that high school, I'm going to have a lot of memories, a lot of feelings. The space is going to make me think a certain way. It's going to smell a certain way to me. It's going to trigger a lot of stuff. When you walk into it, none of that's there, right?
Right.
So every place we walk into, we have a different sort of emotion and feeling associated with it. And that's a unique part of how we view the world. So, I think that plays a part when we go on paranormal investigations or tourisms or tourist locations. Because we know in the paranormal world where there's people just traveling the world, going to haunted locations and, doing investigations. So I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah. And thinking about the environments of those supposedly haunted locations, the Gestalt article had some interesting aspects to consider in overall in an environmental location. Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, the Gestalt article, you're going to put me on the spot, and I don't think I
I'm
memorized them
sorry.
all.
I can help if you need it. I have it in front of me.
No, I think I'll do a pretty good job of it.
I'm sure you will.
It's you write something, you're so into it. Obviously I didn't write the whole paper. I was a co-author, but when
Yeah.
you write some things, um, you're into it. You got it going on, and next thing you know, you're moving to something else, and then it's almost as if sometimes you just forget entirely what you wrote. So it's a little bit problematic at times. But
I know, but it's so much fun to go back and read it and go, hey, I had a part in that. I
yeah,
don't remember
it
this.
is. You're right. But we move on to different things, and
Mhm.
sometimes we just sort of forget about the stuff. Like even with my book, when both came out in 2017, and sometimes I forget what I wrote. To be honest with you, because you're stuffing your brain with other stuff. Um,
Yeah, I
but
can
what?
relate.
Yeah. So what we did was we just kind of looked at um, these sort of Gestalt influences, or these influences that are really in the environment that kind of not so much in the environment, but could impact someone's sort of view on haunted locations. And it's this idea of sort of this interaction hypothesis, which kind of says that ghostly encounters could be rooted in not just the environment, but also sort of the person. So it's not like you walk into a building and EMF causes you to automatically see ghosts, right? I think what
Right.
what we were trying to say is it's sort of bi-directional. So it's a mixture of the person and the environment. So right person, right environment may equal an experience. So we looked at possibly some of the things that both person oriented and environment oriented that may impact a person when they walk into a space. So atmosphere, affordance, ambiguity, immersion, legibility, and memory. We talked about this before. Place memory might impact that as well. The big one that we talk about in there, those are big words, but the main gist of it is there's some research out there that says if you walk into a location, this has to do with legibility. Um, and sort of this threat response that we have. If you walk into a building and you get confused, or you feel like finding the exit's a difficult thing, it causes fear. It causes you maybe to almost, in a sense, creep yourself out,
Hmm.
and then that sort of could not trigger a paranormal experience, but could add to the possibility of having one. So what the article basically does is it kind of just takes a look at what are some influences that are out there that could be impacting us when we go into these haunted locations. This is sort of a skeptical view on things. It's not so much a believer perspective, but I think
Hmm.
anytime you look at the phenomenon of ghostly encounters, you have to um, look at the skeptical side of things and rule out some possible natural causes. So this article, as well as the enchantment article, are sort of more based on, you know, skeptical views, if you want to think about it like that, or ways we can rule out ghostly encounters. Um, But
Yeah.
I think that these things are all important.
Oh, absolutely. As a paranormal investigator, I I appreciate the skeptics that I work with because I am a sensitive and it's really easy for me to, trip off into la la land.
Hmm.
Um, but
Yeah. And you know
as
what's,
I need that
and
grounding.
yeah, it's so, it's like they used to have these pilgrimages, and they still do. But you read all about these religious places. You read all about all these great destinations, right? You
Mm,
read all about them your whole life, and then at some point you get to that place that you've been reading about and hearing about, and how powerful and sacred and religious it is. And then you get there, and it's almost like uh, uh, they call them extraordinary architectural experiences or enchanted spaces. You just walk into it and you're just shocked by it, and it just overcomes you, and people cry and they just feel one with the environment, right? We've all
right.
sort of heard these types of stories. But there's secular pilgrimages now, which is not religious based. And if you look at the ghost hunting world, people are taking sort of these pilgrimages. They're going to these haunted locations that have been on TV and they read about on the internet and they read about in books. So they have all this sort of knowledge and narratives and all this stuff that's really in it. And then they get there and they have this sort of sacred space, extraordinary experience, just even being at the place. Mansfield Reformatory is one of them.
Yep.
Um, I can't think of the other ones off the top of my head. There's a lot in the UK. Um, but when you get there, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm actually here, you know? And I think that can sometimes play a role in psychologically or emotionally when it comes to um, having experiences.
Right. Because if you go in expecting to have an experience, you are probably more likely to have the experience.
Yeah,
Is that right?
yeah, sort of. Yeah, I think that's out there. That's one of the avenues to it. Um, I never discount any experiences, but I think all this stuff is really important just to have in the back of your head when you go into any place like that. I don't want to dull like it's like, oh, don't be so excited to go to a place. That's not what you know. Don't get excited to go to Mansfield Reformatory, but I think you have to take into account these types of things because I'll do the same thing. I'll read all these articles about a place. I'll read all these people's personal experiences, and then when I get there, it's like I already have this feeling about the place and the location, and I'm almost like in awe of it. Um, and sometimes that can impact you.
Yeah. And as far as architecture goes, places like theaters and old libraries, actually around here, some new libraries, churches, they tend to seem to be haunted. Like there are more reports of haunted theaters and libraries and places where people gather. Uh,
Mhm.
do you think there is a particular type of architecture that lends itself more to this, or do you think it's something more nuanced and subtle, like not necessarily everything that's old and Victorian is going to be haunted, but
Yeah.
there may be things along the lines of old wiring and settling boards and stuff like that that could be misinterpreted as
Mhm.
hauntings. And then in other cases, you walk into something like a basilica that has been built to make the person feel small and is full of beautiful artwork, and it's created to make you have that sort of enchanted experience.
Mhm.
um are there certain places that you think are more likely to cause these effects, or like anything specific, or like I said, is
Yeah.
it more nuanced?
Yeah, we kind of looked at that a little bit. We were trying to find if there were specific structures or features that might make a place more sacred or extraordinary. Um, And there are some things that we mention in the article, but it's very, like we talked about before, it's very bidirectional, so it depends on the person.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if I'm raised Christian and I go to um, Notre Dame, Cathedral of Notre Dame, I'm going to have more of an impact there than someone who is atheist, right?
Right.
Um, so theaters for some people are very important places, so they might have more attachment to it in that way. But there are some features that seem to be prominent. I don't remember what they really are off the top of my head, but there is a lot of research out there on something called EAEs, or extraordinary architectural experiences. They really deep architecture or architects really dive deep into what makes a place sacred. As far as how to design sacred places and spaces. So there's research in architecture that is really sort of going towards that. What's good nowadays is they're getting to the point where they can almost put, and I'm not sure what they are, but sort of like EEGs or neuro feedback stuff where you could walk around a building and it can actually get sort of how you're responding to it in real time. Um,
Cool.
so research is going that way. So rather than just guessing or having people take surveys about what they found was stressful or caused them to feel happy or sad or closed in or focused, they can just put these little goggles on and sort of read your brain waves in a way and kind of determine how you're feeling. So it's getting to that point. There's actually research out there that I think we mentioned in the article where they actually did that. So we're getting closer and closer to having sort of real time identification of how buildings are impacting people emotionally.
And kind of as along the same lines, but obviously different, there are some places in nature that seem to create the same kind of
Mhm.
experience. So, not architectural, but say the Grand Canyon or some caves have, like, I'm trying to think of a cave system I've been in, Luray Caverns, for example, or Mammoth Cave. Like, for some people, those create similar experiences, but they aren't man-made and they're not full of,
Mhm.
you know, wiring and things that may cause EMF for people who are sensitive like me to stuff like that. I would not be reacting to that inside a cave,
Yeah.
or at the Grand Canyon. But has your research gone into the realm of the natural spaces?
And we really didn't go too far into that. We kind of stuck with haunted houses, or haunted locations, in a lot of the research that we did, just because there's not, you have to have some sort of a basis for it. So there's not a lot of research out there about um, like haunted outside locations. It's more haunted inside locations. Um, but I think some of the same things may pertain. Um, Obviously every place we go into, everyone has a different emotional reaction to it or attachment to it. Um, and sometimes that's an important part of it as well, whether that's outside or inside. An archaeologist walking into a cave has a different sort of appreciation and feeling as opposed to like a 18-year-old kid who doesn't want to be there, right? Um,
Right.
so that emotionally you're a little different in there. When it comes to experiences, I'm not sure. I'll be honest with you. I can't even recall a paper that's been written or even a book that's been written about um, haunted outside locations that focused on
Mm-hmm.
that specifically. So if anyone's listening, that might be a good book opportunity for somebody.
Yeah. My group has quote unquote investigated a few outside locations, and we found them very difficult because you cannot control for the environment at all. You get a lot
Yeah.
of depending on the time of year, you get a lot of outside sounds, like bugs and animals. So it's a little more difficult to try to quantify the experience in those locations.
Yeah, definitely.
But
There's more variables, for sure.
yeah, but it's interesting. It's still intriguing to me. I just have a hard time actually doing those investigations.
Yeah, it would be challenging. Um, that and there's no place to charge your phone.
Right? Yeah, and if you do have one of those experiences where all the batteries in your cameras are drained at once, what are you going to do?
Yeah,
Call it a
yeah,
night.
that's right. I've seen some recent paranormal shows. Hellier, I think, was one of that I watched, where they were actually in a cave doing some things, or in an abandoned tunnel doing some things, like experiments or something like that. That's really the only one that I can think of off the top of my head. I know some of these ghost shows will go to like a haunted bridge or something like that, but uh, you're right. It's hard to control all the variables in there, so it just makes it easier to do it inside a location and more comfortable too.
Yeah. And your survey of the research that's been done while you were working on these papers, were there any examples of people who may have studied the same location more than once? For example, my group used to have the contract with the city of Raleigh to investigate a local haunted site called the Mordecai Historic Park. And we had the contract for, I want to say it was about 7 years, and we were there
Oh wow.
twice a year. And so we got to know the location very well. We knew exactly where there were certain anomalous EMFs, like not anomalous, I should say. We knew exactly where the wiring was in the whole place. So we knew
Yeah.
if your meter spikes here, it spikes there every single time because there is conduit right there under the floor. But it seems like being able to go back to a location like that over and over helps you do a better job of detecting what is truly inherent in the building and the architecture, the wiring, the plumbing,
Yep.
and what is actually truly anomalous experiences that you have there.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. There's not. I can't think of one off the top of my head of like a longitudinal study of a location. So number of years looking at the same location. Um, I think some places go in for 3, 4 days, or some research articles are 3, 4 days. Others might do a couple weeks. Can't think of anything that's been really long term. I mean, obviously that's the one. That's what you want to do. Um, so sometimes it has to do with access. Sometimes it has to do with time. Um, it's there's probably a lot of factors that go into it, but I'm guessing I would like to see someone do a pretty exhaustive research on a location. It sounds like you guys have. I don't know how much data you have.
Yeah, we have, and then after reading the article about the lighting levels and air quality and temperature, I realized we weren't as consistent at measuring all of those things every single time we were there as we
Mhm.
probably should have been. So hindsight being 2020, if I had the chance to do it all over again, I would be even more detail oriented than
Yeah.
I was at the time.
Yes. And that's it. You just got to go in with a pretty solid plan and just stick to the plan for whether it's a year or 6 months or 2 years. And then the data would be pretty kind of cool to see, no matter which way it goes. It would still be cool to see. I think that one of the downfalls of the paranormal community is they don't share data very well. So you have, I don't know, how many ghost groups do you think there are in the United States, or paranormal investigating groups?
Oh my gosh, at this point, probably thousands.
So if you had thousands of groups doing the same standard form and collecting and inputting that data in an Excel sheet, you know how much points of data you would have?
It
Millions.
would be, yeah.
Yeah. And
It would be
with
fantastic.
that amount of data, academia would be sort of chomping at the bits to get at it. But everyone's doing their own things. They're collecting different data. Whereas if they pulled together and had some consistency, um, the sky's the limit to what if you want to call it the amateur paranormal field, can really do. Um, so it's kind of sad to see that part, because there's so much data that's lost. You know, that's
I
that's
agree.
it's hard to wrap your head around that, because I've met millions of amateur paranormal investigators, and they're committed. They spend a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of everything on these investigations, and usually you post something on Facebook, and then it's gone. There's just no longevity to it.
Right. Yeah. I think at one point there was a group that was loosely associated with the Rhine that were members of investigative groups from all over the country who were trying to come up with a set protocol and kind of rules to live by if you're going to seriously investigate a place. And here are the things that you should be looking at and writing down and trying to quantify. And it seems like the egos kind of got in the way, and it just sort of fell apart before it really got started.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem in these circles, is there are too many people who are trying to say that their way is the best way and not be open-minded, or other, people who just, they're out there to make a name for themselves and not interested in actually advancing the science.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you have people with different motives for going into it, but even if a prominent paranormal celebrity reiterated on the television show, or actually developed a questionnaire or Excel sheet, that could impact millions of people, and you can get some pretty serious data on that. This doesn't seem to be any interest in that. And I know, the people on the television show aren't really dictating what's on the television show.
Right.
That's more producers and television. I get that,
Yeah.
but on their social media pages and things, they have a little bit more control over that. But it's going to take someone of celebrity status to make a change like that. But if you do that, you get noticed by academia. They're going to want that data. I mean, when I did my research in Scotland, I had 250 participants who went through a haunted location, and that's actually a big number for psychology.
Yeah.
As far as number of samples or data or participants, and you multiply that by, I don't even know how many you would get if everyone got together. The data would probably far exceed anything in psychology.
Okay, so the next time I meet a paranormal celebrity, I'm going to be like, hey, you need to do this.
Yeah, and they'll listen to you right away, right?
Right, yeah.
And
They'll
I
be
know
like,
it's not.
You're crazy, back off.
Yeah, and I maybe they just don't think about it, or maybe they just don't know how to, because Excel could be a difficult thing to maneuver. You really put yourself out there if you start doing these types of things, but you could always consult somebody and come up with a standard spreadsheet of the data you want to collect, a consistent questionnaire to ask all participants, and you could throw in like paranormal belief scales, you can throw in anything, and we might find out that through all this data, people with blue eyes have 97% more likelihood of having a paranormal experience, right? So then you go, well, why is that happening? Right? So then you could dig down deeper into that. So you just really can parcel things out a little bit more. And I think it would be so super helpful.
Yeah.
Because, it's, like I said, they spend so much time and effort into it. I think they can really put a dent in the progress of this field, because that's hopefully what we're all looking for, is progress.
Right. That's definitely what my group and some of the groups I'm friends with are interested in, just trying to somehow advance the understanding of what a haunted house is and what spirit interactions are, and maybe someday explain how we get the EVP that we get, because that's still pretty up in the air. We know it works, we just can't exactly explain how it works.
Hmm.
um
Yeah.
going back to the environmental variables that could be looked at in a haunted location. So in this last article I mentioned, it was embedded cues, lighting levels, air quality, temperature, infrasound, and electromagnetic fields. And my experience, I've written down the temperature, the humidity, lighting levels. Most of the time we're in the dark.
Hmm.
It's just the way it goes. Air quality and infrasound stood out to me as really two things that I hadn't really considered. And kind of interestingly, during my day job, air quality has been something that has come up with two of the clients that I have that I write for. That their specializations are in air quality and HVAC systems and that sort of thing. So it's when I was reading this, I was like, wow, it's coming up here too. So if you were to consider air quality, when doing an investigation, like how would you take that into account? What would you be looking for?
Well, in the article, we go over these different sort of variables that you talk about. Air quality is obviously one of them, but the thing we found is that there's not really too much research out there that says that that impacts paranormal experiences or ghostly encounters. I think they talked about a couple things in the article. One was um, uh, God, I can't remember. I think a woman was seeing ghosts, and then the investigators came in there and they determined that the gas heater or water heater wasn't really installed properly, and it flooded the house with like carbon monoxide.
Yeah.
Um,
Which could
and
have been so much worse than just hallucinations.
yeah, so usually, those types of things like carbon monoxide, I've heard people say gas leaks before. Um, a slow gas leak can cause sort of symptoms similar to a haunting. There's not really a lot of research into that. I don't necessarily know what you can really do with air quality, to be honest with you. I mean,
Mm.
most places should have a carbon monoxide detector, and you should be able to smell gas through sulfur, at least in a house. To me, those are things that are outliers when it comes to paranormal or ghostly encounters. They're not really consistently problematic. Um,
Yeah.
I think that sometimes the skeptic will find out that this is what happens, and then they sort of beat it into the ground, and people think it happens more maybe than it does. So if
Yeah.
carbon monoxide's going in your house, the least of your problems is seeing a ghost or feeling like a ghost. Is you know what I'm saying? You got to worry about your life.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, you have to worry about becoming a ghost.
yeah, exactly. Lighting. And there's another sort of misconception out there about mold too. Um, it seems like there was an article published, I don't know how long ago, maybe in like pop culture, listed as one of the top 10 reasons for ghosts, and mold was put on there. And it was thought that mold was causing sort of haunt type phenomenon, um, like hallucinations and uneasiness and sense of presence. And there's been zero research to say that's actually happening. Um, in the paper I went over, I looked at everything, and I couldn't find one academic journal article that linked mold to any sort of paranormal phenomenon. There was a guy who was going to study it. He went in the news quite a bit and talked about it, took pictures with all of his machines, but there was never any thing that came from it. There was never a published article from it. Um, but somehow that got out there that mold is one of the reasons people have ghostly encounters. But that's almost like an urban legend. And I think the same has to
Wow.
do with air quality to some degree. Not to say it couldn't happen. Like if carbon monoxide wasn't in the air, I'm sure you would have these types of things. But I don't think it's happening as frequently. I think these are outliers when it comes to paranormal experiences. So of the billions of paranormal or ghostly encounters over the last 20 years, how many are related to carbon monoxide or gas leaks? I don't know. 10?
Yeah.
I don't, I
Right.
mean, that's just a shot in the dark, but are we going to focus on those or the other, millions and billions?
Right. Yeah, and infrasound is something I can hardly say apparently, but also something I wouldn't even know how to measure. Like, I think you would need pretty specific equipment that most paranormal investigative groups who are doing it on their spare time are probably not going to have.
Yeah, infrasound is basically it's a audio frequency that sort of falls below the normal range of or the range of normal hearing. I think it's like 20 hertz or something like that.
Yeah.
It's almost like a hum you can't hear. But what they found was in the past, there's been some research saying that this was causing people to have paranormal experiences, and they went into locations. They found that people were having when this infrasound was there, they were experiencing some hot type experiences, and then that kind of exploded as one of the reasons why people are having paranormal experiences. And I think in the paper we kind of look at this both from what's research is out there as well as the criticism to it. And I don't think it's really conclusive that that's what's going on. I think they were kind of saying it could be something that was going on. But, usually people will, there's an original article that says it's 20 hertz, and then someone might go and try and test that, and they find that that doesn't cause sort of paranormal experiences. So now you have two conflicting articles. So you kind of can go back and forth with those types of things.
Yeah.
The good news is, I mean, anyone who's really interested in paranormal, the article that I was co-author on is Things That Go Bump in the Literature. It's free on the internet. It's on Frontiers in Psychology. You just type it in and you could read the whole article. It's great because it really goes over EMFs and their role. Because I know everyone has an EMF meter, but this is a nice,
Yeah.
concise way of looking at the past 20 years of research in EMFs and, um, how that impacts haunted houses. So it's a nice, concise article that really goes over everything that a lot of paranormal investigators kind of use. You're right, though. Infrasound is not something you can't go to Home Depot and buy an infrasound machine or anything like that. I honestly don't know how they record it. Audio is not really my specialty. So.
Yeah. And it's just, it was intriguing to me when I was reading that article, just because it was something I had never really considered. I hear infrasound kind of tossed around with certain other things, not necessarily haunted locations, but I've heard it talked about with Bigfoot of all things. And the one of the theories of what might have happened at Dyatlov
Oh, okay.
Pass, that Astonishing Legends covered so well. That was one of the theories that kind of got thrown out there. Maybe something happened with infrasound that made them, the people who died there, all panic and freak out and run out of their tent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's out there as possibilities, but it doesn't seem like the people who throw those ideas out there have a full understanding of how it could even work.
Yeah, it's a complicated. I mean, anytime you try to measure infrasound, it can get pretty complicated. So there's probably a lot of variables associated with it. But at the same time, they looked into this pretty extensively. I can't remember when the original article was published with apparitionals and infrasound, but I'm almost positive it was probably early 2000s. So they've had about 20 years to take a look at this. Mm-hmm. And there's some people who just adamantly deny that that's even should be in a conversation about apparitional experiences, and other people who are, kind of for it. But, I think the research is really not conclusive. So when we talk a little, we talk a little bit about that in the paper as well.
Yeah. And I do recommend to anybody who's interested in this conversation to read that paper. And if it's okay with you, I'll put the link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, no, it's completely free on the internet.
Okay.
Frontiers in Psychology is an open journal, so anyone can do it. Actually, it's beneficial. So if you go click on it and download it, if they have a paper that's um, like paranormal in nature and it gets downloaded, then the journal article editors will kind of look and go, oh, this is something that the people want to read more about. So they'll publish more papers on it. Right?
Oh, definitely. Y'all, please go download this paper.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird that they track things like that, but they do.
Yeah. And I mean, it is becoming more acceptable to have these conversations now more than ever. In the US specifically, because I know, like you said, in some other countries, it's pretty much easily talked about anytime.
Yeah.
But, over the last 20 or 30 years, it's gotten much easier to talk about it freely here. But I do still know some psychologists who are very hush hush about uh, the the studies that they carry out. They don't want their names associated with it because of where they work, and they're afraid of being, not taken seriously as professionals. So I think you're right. The more people who download an article and read an article like this, the more the editors would say, okay, this is something people are interested in. Maybe it'll get easier for everybody to talk about it, even those that are kind of worried about their reputations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The more it gets out there, the more it gets into these sort of mainstream journals, the better, the more research you'll see about it too. Because it's more likely to get published. So, I don't publish a lot of papers. I'm not in academia, so I don't work for a university. It's not kind of what I do, but, I know that people who do, and I think it's important that we get this out there. Um, so, so yeah, go download it.
I appreciate that you are able to be published too. I mean, it's very encouraging to me because, like I said, I've been interested in parapsychology since I was a kid, and I had no idea back then that it could even be something that you could pursue and get a degree in. And maybe back then it wasn't really anything you could get a degree in. But the fact that it is, and I'm meeting more and more people as I do this podcast who have that sort of background, that have at least been able to study it, even if it's more of a minor as opposed to a major sort of thing. It's wonderful to me. It's very encouraging.
Yeah, I think in the last probably 5-6 years, there's been a lot more focus on like consciousness and these types of thinking, and even in mainstream articles. Consciousness has been huge, I feel like, in the last couple of years. I feel like I'm reading all about it and seeing more about it on television, and it's more mainstream. But consciousness is really sort of associated with um, survival hypothesis. What happens after we die. Entanglement, telepathy. Consciousness is sort of in there somewhere, So it's always nice to see more and more attention given to it, because it used to be, well, we're robots, and robots, when they stop working, we're just circuitry, and once it stops working, we're done. There is no consciousness. It's just what we trick ourselves into believing. And I think there was a lot of scientists or academics who were saying that they could, solve consciousness and put it in a robot. Obviously, that's not happened. So consciousness is elusive, and Rupert Sheldrake talks a lot about consciousness and how it might not be inside our heads, but external. So there's all these great theories about it out there recently, that are really just interesting to read.
Yeah. Have you seen the documentary Superhuman?
No, I never see that.
Okay. It's available on Amazon and I was completely in awe. The subject is basically consciousness and how we as humans are not using our full potential or not living up to our full potential.
Mhm.
It's very interesting. I won't ruin it for you, but if you have a chance, look it up. It was
Sure.
really mind blowing, even to
Yeah.
me. And I'm pretty open minded and pretty, uh, just, a history of paranormal events that I've always been trying to explain, which is how I got into parapsychology and all of this. And I watched it and there were parts of that movie that just made me go, oh my gosh, like we really
Sure.
are nowhere close to living up to our full potential. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to step out of the sort of mundane of our lives and get enchanted or in awe
Yeah.
of something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's that word again. I was totally enchanted.
Yeah, no, that's what
um,
we all seek to do that.
yeah. So are you working on anything currently? Any new research or any papers we should be looking out for? How could people kind of get in touch with you or where can they follow you?
I'm easy to find. I'm on social media. My Facebook and Twitter is Haunted Theories, and my website is hauntedtheories.com. The best way to get a hold of me is through social media. You can always just message me through there, and it can keep up to date about what I'm up to. I haven't been doing too much. Um, I'm probably going to focus a little bit more on hopefully getting another book out there. Not so much the research articles. I did 3 of those, so I'm kind of content where I'm at with that. Those take a lot of
Yeah.
work, and I give all the. I didn't, I wasn't the driving force behind a lot of those articles. I was just sort of a person who did some research reviews and literature reviews and ideas, sent stuff off, but those are a lot of work, and you don't really get a lot of recognition for them in the general population or audience, and you don't really get
Right.
paid for them either. Um, I suppose as if you're a professor, you're kind of getting paid in a way, but um, so I'm been starting to work on some book ideas. I haven't really figured out where I'm going with it yet. So hopefully by this time next year, I'll have hopefully another book under the belt. We'll see where it goes.
Cool. Well, if you'd
Yeah.
like to come back on and talk about your book when you're ready to do that, I would love to have you.
Well, it took me 5 years to write the other one, so um, you might not hear from me in about 5 years. So be prepared
I
for that.
I totally understand. I wrote one that did not have nearly as much research in it as yours. It was kind of just here are the experiences I've had, and that took me 2 years.
Yeah. No,
It's when you have a life and a day job, it's hard to do.
yeah, you're right. I mean, you do it on the weekends when you feel like it, because sometimes you're just exhausted. So,
Yeah.
um,
But I say kudos to you and anybody who has the patience and the drive to actually finish a book and put it out there. And I really did enjoy yours. So the book is the reason that I contacted you and asked you about doing this. So, and I
uh-huh.
appreciate your saying yes.
No, no, it's no problem. I usually say yes to anyone who reaches out to me to want me to do something. I try to at least. Um, Even with COVID and the pandemic, I have a lot of free time. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all
as we
do.
all do. Yes, as we all do. I'm
Right.
not the only one with free time.
Right. I'm pretty sure if we didn't have COVID, I wouldn't have started the podcast. So,
Yeah, there's probably a lot of great things that came out of it as far as like books and um, you know, ideas and probably movie scripts and family spending more time with family and less time, out doing things. There's probably some benefits to it, but obviously overall it's been a nightmare for everybody.
oh yeah. As much as I try to be an optimist and look at the bright side, I do honestly wish that COVID had never been a thing.
Oh God,
But
yeah, yeah. Every day is it's gut wrenching to watch the
yeah,
news and all that.
But hopefully the light at the end of the tunnel is getting bigger now, and things can kind of start heading back in the right direction. So.
Yep, let's hope so.
Yep. Okay, well, I want to say thanks again for joining me. This has been a really good conversation. I totally enjoyed it, and good luck on your future endeavors, including the new book.
All right. Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Thanks again to Brandon Massullo for coming on to discuss his research into what aspects of purportedly haunted locations may influence people's perceptions of those places. Thanks also to you for listening. If you like the podcast, please give it some rating love on your favorite podcast app. Share it with friends and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Doing so will also help the podcast be found by others. If you have an idea for a show topic, you can fill out the contact form at peeppodcast.com. That's PEEP podcast.com. Remember, that stands for People Experiencing Everyday Paranormal. If I can find a study about it, I'll be happy to use it. You can keep up with the show on its Facebook page, facebook.com/Peep Podcast. Don't forget the periods in Peep. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe and be well.